You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, and this week we're actually bringing part 1 of 2 for something we've actually discussed doing both on the podcast and behind the scenes for a while, and that is basically for larger events, if you're wanting to get into them, what are some of the considerations you should have that you might not necessarily think of? So with that, let's get it taken away.
So this is something that is more in your realm than mine, mainly because when it comes to this kind of thing, I'm behind the scenes as a judge. So when it comes time for me to actually begin working on this, there are some avenues that I do get to discuss and I have knowledge about, but I don't have the intimate understanding of what goes into setting up a pre-release that's not on-prem, an RCQ that is on-prem, or a tournament series, etc. So this is something that is not terribly far into me, but interestingly far into me, especially from the vendor side, because usually, unless you have a store as a vendor, you don't care about this. And even then, you might bifurcate your business and say, okay, we're going to have LGS people deal with the LGS, and really the only time the LGS and the warehouse will communicate is if something needs to be moved. If we need to bring product from the warehouse and the LGS needs to, quote, buy it, unquote, to put it on a shelf or on a case, that's it. And then finance that sits over that as the entity is then basically who the LGS is going to run everything by. They would have insight into what's going on. And so my understanding is one of the first things you need to do is figure out who your event is going to be for. When we talked about this today, you were like, oh, we need to add this. This is actually super important to figure out.
And I think one of the important things is when you say, like, who is it for? It doesn't just mean, is it for your players, for traveling players, whatever. Like, who is it actually for? Are you doing this for, spikes? Are you doing this because in order to keep your WPN premium status, you have to? Is this something where you're doing it for like a local charity or like a food shelter or something? Lorcana has like a Diet Coke Invitational where buy in is Diet Coke that I guess they donate or something. Or is it going to be something a little bit larger, like a national charity, like for homeless or disabled veterans or NAMI or something like that? And that's something that I think a lot of people, when you think about a tournament, it's just, we just want to have a fun tournament where people come and like, we're going to leverage our payout based on who it's for. We're going to leverage our staffing based on who it's for. We're going to leverage pretty much any facet of that tournament relates to who it is for. Yep. Now, there is a point you get to where it doesn't matter. The cash prize is big enough, or it's the one big legacy event and vintage event on your continent for the entire year. But we're talking more like small scale, grassroots LGS level. And I think that's important because if you're doing a tournament for locals, okay, now it can be, do we want to make it into a series? Yep. Do we want it to be for our grinders or our EDH players? Or do we have a judge who comes out regularly for events that we can get to judge that event? And I think it's really important to understand that when you're doing these events, it's not just for the players. It can be a morale boost for your staff to just run an awesome event. I'm sure, and you can attest, you remember a lot of the events that were awesome, probably more of the ones that were bad because of how uniquely bad they were. But the events that are awesome, you get such a good feeling after you're done. Yeah. Like when you're done judging and it's insane, I'm sure it's like euphoria for you. But it's really important because it's not just about the players. It is about the larger audience of who you want to bring in, who do you want to associate with your store. And I think I want to highlight Hunter Burton, and I'll probably do that throughout the episode because when you look at like just a local event that grew and grew and grew, they have done literally everything right, at least to the public. Everything they've done has been phenomenal. I wish every tournament were as passionate as the Hunter Burton Memorial is, which you can attest to having attended. But yeah, I think that's important because it's not just for outside of RCQs, the competitive players necessarily, or is that who you want to bring in?
Yeah.
And that's important because it's everything past that is determined by that one decision.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about like fostering a community regardless of whether it's because it's a tournament series or because you want to lean in and you want to try and help a TO. And my example for that is I've judged 2 CEDH events now. And that's to help grow the CEDH. Like we have those events because we want to grow that community. And we want to help that TO, who's, I think, the biggest CEDH TO or independent TO on the East Coast. Star City being the largest, obviously, because they do the 10Ks or whatever at all the opens and or spotlights. Yeah. And I didn't think about that. When you said who this is for, I thought mainly, okay, is this going to be more casual players in like a pre-release style or more of your grinders in an RCQ style for those of us that mainly pay attention to Magic? And that's kind of how I thought about that. I never really thought about it from a community building standpoint or even just the standpoint of growing your name as a business inside the community, even if you don't want to have a tournament series, but just letting people know like, hey, when you're out there RCQ grinding, we're also going to be having RCQs. So why don't you come out? Exactly. Add us to your circuit, right? Yeah. Come on out. And so that is more important than I thought of. The way Magic has changed since when I first started judging and now has changed the emphasis on each one of those styles of events too, because even pre-releases, their style has changed. It wasn't that every LGS used to have a pre-release. They used to be more
the regional pre-releases.
Exactly, regional pre-releases. And those were huge. And those were for everyone. Every type of player, stores, and vendors.
Yep.
So your one TO is basically having a 500-person Grand Prix, which unironically at the time was the size of a Grand Prix.
Yeah. Insane to think about that those are small events now.
Yeah. And then it went to then they started changing focus and moving things around, and now your LGS pre-releases primarily followed the same pattern, and they're kind of catered towards a more casual player because they're usually 3-round events, 4-round events. The days of uncapped round pre-releases are virtually gone. And I want to say thank you for making that possible, TOs and judges alike. Fun.
The 2 a.m. flights were so cake.
Yeah. Fun, but miserable. And it allows you to do a midnight pre-release easier, get at least 30 minutes of sleep, and then have a 9 a.m. if you were going to be doing that. And so I thank you for bringing that up in the conversation behind the scenes today because of how useful a piece of information that is. One of the things that anybody who's scheduled any kind of event or done any kind of planning for party planning understands lead time. And lead time changes depending on what you're doing and especially where you're doing it. I've mentioned a number of times that I was looking to set up an LGS the fall before COVID. And one of the things we were discussing with 2 of the sites that we were looking at was when it's time for game pre-releases, do we have to hold them off-site? And if so, what are all those logistics? Now, pre-releases are generally on-site. RCQs usually as well. You'll cap if you have to for the space. Looking outside of your space, completely different. So please, walk us on through.
Yeah. So one of the big things with lead time is, obviously you want to avoid any large events that are relatively local to you in terms of other stores, generally. Or if you don't care, then you don't care and you just schedule it anyways. In terms of getting off-site, most event spaces, and this is from working in hotels for a while, you're looking at a 3 to 6 month lead time for their event space, generally speaking, outside of wedding season, which is a whole different animal. But with those 3 to 6 months, you now know, okay, I can based on the space I have, how many people can I get in? All right, how far in advance do I have to notify them? Because if it's an event where I want, the equivalent of an L3 at it, I need to make sure I'm avoiding other large regional events so that I can actually get staffing for that. Obviously, that's not required at the RCQ level anymore, but if you are running something like an ARG or a 10K, you may want to have a little bit more backing than you're required to. And that's one of the big things is most Magic people, judges, vendors, well, I won't speak for judges, I'll let you do that. Vendors, players, we don't necessarily plan that stuff ahead as much. Or in some cases, we may wake up that morning and decide, all right, we're going to the RCQ an hour away. But generally speaking, for that, I want as much lead time as possible. I'm a big fan of advanced communication and constant communication about it. Because if you think about it, not only do I have to have staff, I have to find out if that event space has its own tables and chairs.
Okay.
How much those tables and chairs are. If they don't, where can I rent them from? How much is that? Because that's all stuff that needs to be factored into your cost for the event. And generally, I want to have about 90 days out, here's my listed cost, my event space, my whatever. So that now when I have vendors, if I have vendors come in from offsite, I'm generally going to be getting my money back from them. Or I'm going to have a less than stellar payout for an event like this, which is typically not what you want. You don't want people paying $50 and having 35 go into the pool. That just feels bad. And understanding, all right, if I have extra people show up, if I don't cap, what do I need to worry about then? Who do I have on site to contact? Do I want food trucks there? There's a pre-release in town that basically gets 3 food trucks for their Saturday afternoon, and it's one of the most popular ones because they know, there's going to be food trucks there. Well, they have to plan that ahead of time as well. All of this factors into the first point of who is this for? Do I want to be known as the spot that has this cool event, and all right, that's where we're going to go? Do I want it to be known as, okay, this is a place where if I go for a competitive event, I know it is very well judged, it is officiated well, and everything is fair. I don't have to worry about someone at the store coming over and saying, well, this is the ruling, and just going with that. And that all factors into how are we scheduling this? Now, if I have a 10K, I'm going to want people available earlier in the morning because I need to get registration out of the way. I need to get deck checks up and running if I need to. I need to make sure judges and my store is staffed as well. And that all, plays into this, for me, the 3 to 6 month window of wanting to know as soon as possible, this is locked in, ironclad, I don't have to worry about anything. Now, if you're planning an event 2 weeks ahead of time, you're going to have a lot of problems. Obviously you're not going to have a problem finding a judge, but if you need to suddenly get tables and chairs, it will probably be legitimately more cost effective to go buy out all the Walmarts of those lifetime plastic tables than it will be to rent. And that's something you need to worry about, because if I have one event like that for a new community or for a certain crowd and it goes poorly, that now reflects on me as an LGS forever. There is an LGS on the other side of the state that is well known for having one bathroom that is always broken. It's been a joke for 15 years now, and they still get asked about it. And that's from a couple of bad events where it was broken. It's now their lifetime reputation. And you don't want to be the guy at the other end of, poor, prior planning prevents poor performance. You don't want to be the guy with a poor performance if you can avoid it.
That all makes sense.
And I think another thing too is you can get, well, this will wait till the next episode. Sorry, for part 2. That's a point for judges for later. But yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is a lot of people start their events and they get it in their head that it's going to be the best event ever. And then if it's not, they get really discouraged. I would highly encourage everyone, it's okay if you have 2 or 3 okay or so-so or not so great events. If you're really passionate about it, don't stop. Learn from your mistakes, fix them, and improve.
Yep.
Hopefully, it won't be something like your bathroom being broken that just sticks around forever. But I really think that a lot of people get discouraged by little obstacles around. I didn't think about needing security because obviously you're going to have a room full of people with backpacks that could contain thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in stuff in them.
Yep.
And it's all that kind of stuff that when you look at an event, and I'll never forget, it was 2008 Legacy Chicago, like round 3, you just hear someone hit the floor. And it was someone getting tackled after they had stolen a couple backpacks, and it was Pastimes that had run it. I, to this day, despite what anybody says, will stand by Pastime events and the quality of their events because of that one event. And that's one of those little things that you may not think about. And I think it's important when you're out at events, watch what people do. Watch what the judges are doing and see, okay, is this a good judge staff or not based on my experience with them and what they did?
Yeah.
Are the players having a good time? Okay, why are the players having a good time at this event? What is going on? Is the format good? Is there music playing? Are they like watching Tarantino or something on TV? Just to try to figure out what works for other people and to try to emulate that. Because I think in a lot of cases, people try to reinvent the wheel. And I'm sorry, it doesn't really work. There haven't been many iterations on a Grand Prix or a Magic Fest or whatever of like new impressive ways to run it. So if it's not, just don't.
Yep. My experience with lead time comes in one of 2 ways. The first is the LGS I did work with primarily before I moved was located in a downtown area where parking was notoriously terrible. And for a while, what they were actually doing was not hosting the LGS on-prem, but across the street. And there were no cars allowed on the street, so you didn't have to worry about it. Easy pedestrian crossing. And it was in the auditorium in the mayoral building. And they had it booked for like Dragon's Maze up through like the next 2 years. And then something happened and they got bumped. So we had to move out of there. It was a fantastic spot. And we moved to a hotel. And that meant that we were able to fit more people in if we had to, because there were more rooms available, more conference rooms if we wanted to split. We would put PTQs in these places as well. So we could have, there was room for outside vendors, which is also how I would do some of the work there. We were able to book every pre-release at the previous pre-release, so it was consistently scheduled, which allowed us to work a deal because not only were we going to be booking 4 events a year, we were going to be booking 3 or 6 or 9 months out, basically, because WotC was good with that schedule. And moving there was through a system of trial and error, like you were describing, watching what other people were doing and using personal experience, because at that point in time, the people in power were Magic players that did travel.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to go play a Grand Prix trial in Boston at 9 a.m. I guess we'll get up at 3 a.m. and drive it. Like those kinds of players that understood what other players wanted out of these events. It was further from food. There was still food close by. It was all within walking distance. But the sacrifice of that gave us a larger, easy-to-use space, better parking. If you wanted to take a bus, there is a bus stop right outside, very easy to get to. And so the lead time for those events had to be the 3 months because it was a hotel convention center. So we were vying for that space with anybody that just wanted to use it for whatever purpose. So there's that. Lead time for judges has changed a ton. For pre-releases, you would always just tap the guys. Nobody was traveling to go judge a pre-release. You just tap the guy. You like the night before, if you wanted to. You just tap the guy. And that's still kind of the way it is if you want to judge or not. As you move through the system of competitiveness, then the lead time changes. And the higher level judge you want, the more lead time you need to give them, because the opportunity to judge meaningfully at your level locally is diminishing unless Star City comes through all the time or you're local to ARG, etc. So L2s and L3s right now, they're not difficult to find, but they are traveling more to get the experience that they need to operate and graduate through the program. Yep. So you need more time. And this will come up later in part 2, but you also need now more incentive for them. Having an L1 judge an RCQ works until it doesn't. And the only way to graduate an L1 to an L2 is to have them work with an L2, effectively mentor the L2 to show them like, hey, I can run an event, I can handle the logistics, I can work with the team, and I can organize a team, and I can manage a team and delegate. And sometimes when you have an L1 that's eager to graduate to L2, you can get an L2 or an L3 in for that experience because they understand what it's like to try and get that done. So they'll, and I'll put this word in quotes, sacrifice of themselves and what they could be doing from a judge standpoint to help and elevate that L1. So lead time for judges is most certainly changing. If you're the organizer of something independent and large, you are also going to need to have a really big lead up because you have to solicit nationally, and that means you're going to be using judge apps and the quagmire that comes with that as well, because you're going to get cover CVs and resumes. And you'll have to pick your head judge ahead of time already, so you'll have had to effectively done that vetting either through knowing somebody long enough to trust them, and then sit down with them, or not, and then interview, and then sit down with them and work through the apps like that. And it will be a time-consuming process. So as your event scales up, your judge lead time also scales up. And that can be difficult for some people in some places. But it's also understandable, too, because they are a resource, and they are finite. And there are other opportunities besides you and what you're doing. So much like your players, you need to give them a reason to come up to you. And if you have a bad reputation with judges, they all know it's not as big a community as people might think it is. And you won't get side-eyed from other judges because you need a judge. And the program would rather see somebody at a store with a bad reputation to try and at least make sure the event ran smoothly than have no judge at all. But that also weighs on it too.
This is a question I've actually never asked a judge.
Okay.
What is your ideal lead time for an event?
Again, it depends on the scale of the event. I have a standing offer with my store because we are graduating judges from L1 to L2. And for reasons, if you care about, you can reach out to me directly. I refuse to move through this iteration of the program. And I said, if you have anything from a pre-release through an RCQ and a 1K, solicit who you want. And if they don't work out, I would like at least a week.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
For a CEDH event, I like a little more time on that because I have to actually recalibrate myself to handle what that format allows.
Yeah.
Because it is markedly different, the things that can be said, discussed, etc. at a table for CEDH than other competitive events, and it's not just flipping a switch like that. It takes me a little while to gear up and get ready for that. And also, I like to observe games so I can understand better when certain things are happening, and I could just tap the sign and say, move it along. Yeah. Because without that experience, then I'm not going to be as efficient. So that is an event that takes a lot of time. For travel events, I like to submit my resume as soon as possible so I can find out as soon as possible so I can pay the least amount of money possible for that travel.
That's fair. Yeah, I assume like GP level, like Magic Fest, any of that, obviously you want as much notification as possible so you can.
Even EW, which is in my backyard. It's a 5-hour drive. We go out the day before, come out the day after. I like to know as soon as possible for that exact reason, which is, a couple of months.
So for events where, like Eternal Weekend, for example, where I assume, obviously, probably rather play, but you would also love to judge something like that. Is that something where you're like booking the lodging ahead of time because you know you're going to go regardless, or is that also a wait and see kind of thing?
So for something like EW, I would for sure book the lodging because my fallback is I bring cards and play.
Okay.
If I don't know people that are going to the event, and I'm going to be applying as a judge, then I will wait for that acceptance to come back before I book my lodging. But if I know people that are going, that's why I don't want to speak for everyone, but that's also why a lot of judges like double and quad up. It's cost savings, but also when you know somebody that's going, it's a lot easier for you to submit that application and want to start paying costs and setting aside money. So when like when we used to have a couple judges that we joked about, like would travel with the kit, so to speak, and that means the GP kit that went from GP, like there were a handful of judges that would went, and they like created this little network of like, oh, I know they're going, so I can go, like I can solicit for the event. If I get accepted, I'll room with them. That means this other person will go. That starts another room, and so it became this spider web out. That's why you see a lot of judges soliciting on social media to say, like, hey, who do I know that's going to this event? Sometimes knowing who will determine whether or not you even submit the application. So there's that aspect to it.
That's fair. Yeah, I was curious about that because I've never actually asked any judge, so thanks.
Yeah, no problem at all. Like, it's a fine and good question because not all judges have the opportunity to actually travel or have the opportunity to think about their travel and their planning, or have existed in the program long enough to actually discuss with other judges even how they do it, how they make even a part-time living off of this gig. Right?
Yeah, which should be more, but we'll get to that next episode.
Yeah, one of the things I heard that made me laugh out loud was I won't book any hotel that I don't have status at. Like if I look at the event and I can't book a hotel for that event that I have status at, I'm not even gonna submit. Because to the point that you were just making traditionally, judges' payment the comp was so bad that if you didn't have status, you couldn't even pay for the hotel. So there's that.
Yeah.
And while we're gearing up towards cost, which is going to be the second session or second episode rather, the last bullet point we have to talk about is pricing and some of the other things that happen that are based on attendance math, like day of elements to an event.
I think this is, and this also harkens back to the first question is who is it for? Is, the prize, math, everything. Okay, well, are they getting swag? Do I include that as part of the package? Because, it's common practice. Eternal Weekend's a great example where you have the playmat package. Most events have a playmat package, and there's a little bit extra that you spend for that. Now, that doesn't mean there's any extra money in the prize pool, but that does add to the cost.
Yep.
So now, if I'm having a casual tournament, is it skins? Okay, am I capping rounds? If so, how many packs am I potentially handing out per person per round?
Yep.
And how do I math that out at 100 people? And it's easy. You take your pack cost basis, you multiply it by the number of people, and you figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is something that some of my friends actually have conflicted opinions on, is should you check that with a judge? I personally am of the opinion that I don't want the judge involved in pricing math or pricing because I want them to appear completely impartial and uninvolved. Do you have an opinion on that?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. The experience I have with this is prizing took so long for the judges to figure out on site that one of the other judges said, okay, this is ridiculous. This is how these other stores that I have worked at does it. Either we do this or we're going to stop doing the math and you have to do it, meaning the TO. Because what we would do is effectively what you just did, what you explained, which is how we used to do F&Ms. They would give us a number of packs equal to cost or whatever and say, pay out what you have to. If you need extras, here's where they are. If you don't, put the extras here. And so you create this back catalog.
Yeah.
And no matter what, if it was always meant to look impartial, to your point. The judges, despite the fact that we might have had to run the math, the prizing still came from the TO. They just signed off on our math. Yeah. And gave us the thumbs up or not. That's perfectly fine. Prizing is something that could make or break even pre-releases. A lot of people who are more spiky will go where the competition is, and higher stakes generally means that's where the competition floats to or centers around. So if you pay out better, you're going to have more spiky players, and that means that it'll be top heavy. And if it looks like a judge is the one fostering that community, then it could look a little bit negative where for some reason it's the judge that's creating this little bit of friction in the player base possibly, as opposed to the store, a TO, etc. So I love the idea of impartiality when it comes to that. Or if it's not impartiality, at least done behind the scenes so the judge can't be seen as doing it, and the TO takes responsibility for it, like I was doing it for that little bit.
And I think another thing is when you're thinking of prize and attendance math, and you're obviously taking your cost, you do need to factor in those things like, do I have an extra playmat? Do I have dice? Do I have free swag or extra packages? And how does that actually equate into that math? Because players are not stupid. They can figure out what the prize payout should be. There were a bunch of people within the last couple of years saying, how is Star City doing this? Because they have X amount of people attending and are paying out X. They'll do the math to figure out if the payout is good or not. Yep. And if it's not, you need to have a justification. Mm-hmm. And is that, hey, look, costs were high, whatever. I don't think that's a good enough justification. I think you should still eat it as a TO because that's how it works. Yep. But you need to have that ready. And I think that, with that pricing as well, is it, and this changes based on basically what you said, and I appreciate you mentioning F&M, is F&M math is easy because it is. I don't pay anything except for the cost of packs. Yeah. And then making sure that at these large events, you are paying attention to that cost. And you have to do the math of if I'm paying, $3,000 for the venue and $800 for the rental, and I expect 50 players. Yep. I want 75. It would be great to get 100. How does entry look like at each of those price points? And does that impact, do I think, who's going to show up? And this is, again, to highlight Hunter Burton. They do a great job of appealing to a wide variety of types of players. You have competitive events, some more casual events, obviously CEDH making a large presence there, and you have prize math done effectively. So people say they feel good going to this event. Yeah. They got their money's worth out of these events. It wasn't that long ago that Channel ran everything, and those prizes got worse and worse and worse. And I guess here we are in a similar boat, but I digress. Yeah.
I'll tell you, despite the fact that F&M pricing was done on the fly, the idea or the mentality behind how we priced F&M was the exact same as how we eventually started pricing pre-releases. And the reason we would have extra packs for F&M was because we priced out winning records only. So there was the opportunity to have a pack that couldn't go anywhere because you couldn't massage those packs to make a difference between first and second and third and fourth. So you would have one or two packs left over, and the store didn't want to raffle them off, which you could have done anyway once you were done with your prize math. Also, you can't really do that math until round 2 starts because it could be funky.
It's a cluster prior to then.
Yeah, exactly.
Just do it in round 2.
And thankfully, when you prize out in packs, you usually end up with 2 IDs pretty quickly, which is just a chop and go home. Exactly. And if you wanted to throw the extra pack or something in there, you could absolutely do that there. The pre-releases were the same way, so people came to expect a similar prizing method, but pre-releases also had a dedicated number of packs set ahead of time per record, starting at break even, because we prized a little bit better. At pre-releases, you want to thank people for coming out regardless, right? And that's the one that would kind of like exemplify the statement, it'll come out in the wash.
Yep.
Because there could be some pre-releases where at the end of the day, you had a lot of 2-1s and a handful of 3-0s, and so you prized out a lot. And then there would be some pre-releases where people just picked up a lot of losses and draws, so you prized out a little. Like a 201 prized out more than a 2-1 for sure, but like when you ended up with a bunch of 102s because there are a lot of new people there and stuff like that, that's when it came out in the wash, right?
Yep.
And so, the store might eat it on a Saturday event, but technically make it up on the Sundays. So as long as you weren't super nitpicky about it either, and I think this is important here to remember, as long as you didn't like pick nits, then you can get away with this. Like it is a very rigid prize structure that you can set up ahead of time and understand that it's going to fluctuate one way or the other, and by the end of the year it should just break even and you'll be fine with that. For the weeklies here, you get prized out in credit, and of course the spiky players have figured it out that if you have an odd number of players and 2 people 3-0, the store loses.
Yep.
And so you end up playing for the prize pack a lot more often than you think.
Yep.
That one. But yeah, they'll find the angle, and they might lose out on like some of the spikier formats, but they'll make that back on all the commander pods or on the other games that are there that might not have a draw system or might not have a lot of 3-0s, things like that, because they're not so worried about every penny all the time coming out positive on every single event, because it's not always about the event. It's just getting the person in the door, and now we're going to venture down another path, so I'll pull out. When it comes to prizing and attendance math in particular, is there anything else that we need to touch on before we move into picks?
There's just one thing I want to say prior to moving in, and that is specifically with drafts.
Oh, okay.
I like to run drafts at a loss because to me, drafts are your advertising for players.
All right.
And I know that if I'm taking, now when I say at a loss, I mean like at a 50 to 75 to dollar loss at most, because I know I'm going to sell that person singles or sleeves or dice. And that is the one event that I am always comfortable running at a bit of a loss.
That's fair. Yeah. And that is actually, drafts are the one event where I heard the players complain the most about the rising costs.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean this draft is $15? It's 3 packs. It's like, okay, well, 3 packs are still like 4 and change right now. So it's like, you're barely not paying for the space.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes sense too. The one thing I dislike when you talk about drafts in the LGS ecosystem are the people who believe that part of the prizing includes what they open. Because then the moment that attitude finds its way to the players is when you have people stop playing the draft and start playing the what cards can I draft that are worth money.
Yep, the money drafters.
Yeah. And it's not like they always do poorly either, but they they found the place where the store wants to make equity, and so they're going to try and remove that equity from the
Yeah.
store. And it's
Yeah.
not meant to be malicious to the other players, but
No,
that's just the
but it
thing.
is.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if we're not going to get prized out properly because the packs, geez, the alliteration on that, are part of the prize pool. It just keeps on going, baby. Then they're going to get their money's worth out of the draft. Like,
Yeah.
I knew some people like that where they're like, all right, I came here to draft and have fun, and rare drafting is something that I have to do to be able to keep drafting. It's like, okay, or hear me out. You could learn to be a better player and drafter instead of train wrecking everybody. And they're like, nah,
And
man,
still end up ahead.
yeah, just I like the gold and the orange symbols. I'm gonna just scoop them. All right, you do you, friend. All right, picks.
Yes.
Now, we didn't decide who was going first ahead of time, but we are both talking about standard cards.
Yes.
So-
But I am talking about a standard card for EDH, which is very out of character for me.
All right, so you can go first.
All right. I am picking from a piece of my childhood, the Southwind Avatar from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, presented by Magic the Gathering. It is a rare,
Yep.
1 black and 3 for a 3/4. Death Touch. Whenever another creature you control dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Now, this is clearly an Aristocrats card. I don't think there is any question about this. I am picking the extended art as well because Aristocrats EDH tends to be a little bit more casual, and I'm going to try to lean into, while we have collector's packs and these cool versions are affordable, let's try to pick them up. Now, this is clearly an Aristocrats card, not Modern if Aristocrats comes back, not Pioneer if Aristocrats comes back. This is an EDH through and through Aristocrats card. So the first thing I did was take a look at EDH Rec and see, obviously, your new commanders are going to be all the Turtles cards because that's the set it's in. That's just naturally how it is. Now, when you look at Top Commander is when things get very, very interesting because almost every single one of the top 6 commanders, which are Sephiroth, Fabled Soldier, Aloro, Dina, Soul Steeper, Teysa Karlov, worth mentioning, Doran, Besieged by Time, and Felithor the Steadfast. Now, what do all of those have in common? Life as a theme. Teysa stands out because she's a good Aristocrats commander. Going further down, you're starting to see small 1 to 2 to 3% inclusion in these Aristocrat-style commanders. But what you won't see is things like Igra, Eater of All, or Korvald, or some of the more, like, stalwart Aristocrat-style commanders that offer that effect in the command zone. You know, Wart, great example of another one. This tells me that despite what to me seems like clearly an Aristocrats card, everyone else just sees a life gain card. Despite this card having two different halves of 2 different combos written on it, with what was the enchantment from Saga? Sack, when it dies, gain life equal to its toughness. Remembrance.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
It has that on there as well, which gives a little bit of utility because you can now get into some like Aetherflux Reservoir, to do a callback to your recent pick, shenanigans if you really want to, because it is equal to toughness. I just think that right now we're obviously in like a good downturn of Turtles, especially feedback has not been great from the draft environment. So there have not been a lot of packs opened, locally at least. But I think that right now, looking at $2 to $3 on this card, this is something that is probably just a slow gainer. It's not going to be something that, you know, is a card away. It's just a new iteration on this effect with a little bit bigger butt.
Yeah.
And 2 very disparate effects that can still combo. So I'd be thinking at about 12 to 16 months, unless somehow 4 mana gets affordable and modern, and Aristocrats comes back, but I just don't see that happening at all. This is going to be one of those fall asleep, wake up one day, and it's $5, it's $10, it's whatever it is, because this is a unique effect within that on one single card. And it's tied to the Turtles universe. We can't really get an easy replacement, unless we get a universes within, which would be great, of any of the universes beyond cards that we were supposed to get those of.
Yeah.
But I will say I'm not super comfortable going very deep on this card. I ordered 5. Just my EDH set is good. It was like $13. Mm-hmm. Put it in a box and forget about it. This is not something I would suggest going super deep on because it's just not a popular theme. Snakes are not super popular. Neither are spirits. And aristocrats, I won't say that it's part of like the feels bad strategies, like, maybe Nekasar was,
Yeah.
Or is, but I feel like it's adjacent to that.
It's a salty strategy for sure, and not every table is willing to accommodate the aristocrats player.
Exactly. So I don't know if this is, necessarily go super deep. Certainly not for me. Do so at your own risk. Yep. But yeah, I think this is a slow, steady gainer that has the potential to like hit a nostalgia. Like for me, it was a nostalgia hit. That's why I was drawn to the card to begin with, and then I started digging into it, and here we are.
Yeah, I like it overall. I feel like I read this when we were doing our set review, and I just had it in my list of cards to pare down from, just like Ninja Teen or something like that, which is another aristocrat. It feels like this set is just full of like really good aristocrats pieces too.
Yep.
And so there's an opportunity for just a lot of little parallel picks to kind of pop off with this one.
Definitely.
And it just plays well in the aristocrat shell. It's not the sturdiest. 4 mana is a lot. It costs more mana than some of the other, like, what used to be more popular aristocrats
pieces
commanders.
For that.
Well, like Vito, Thorn of Duskrose is a 2-card combo. Stuff like that is further down this list of commanders. So there's also an amount of, if some of the older pieces come back in style, if bell bottoms come back for the umpteenth time, then maybe
Jinkos are back. Okay.
I know. I really just want a pair of pants with one single leg as wide as my hips. You and I could each. You and I could wear one pair of just one pair of pants. If some of that old tech comes back for sure, then this picks up. Or like you were saying, and this is kind of where I'll end it, because I think my valuation is going to be the same. If Aristocrats just becomes more palatable at the top level, then this kind of pops off. Yep. For me this week, I am looking at a standard card as well from Final Fantasy. I'm looking at the Earth Crystal. The Earth Crystal is a legendary artifact that costs 2 and 2 green. It says green spells you cast cost a colorless less. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. And it has an activated ability of 4, double green, tap, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. And if you're wondering, yes, those will then be doubled by the effect of the Earth Crystal. Now, when I was taking my notes, CK was buying 198 at 640. They're now buying 199 at 640, which is weird to see it go up by a whole 1. They had 8 total for sale at $11. There were 393 listings of LP or better on TCG Player with a market of $9.90. There are now 391 listings with a market of $10.17. So as we see in the stocks graph, it just goes, up and to the right ever so slowly. I added this to my list in July of 2025, so shortly after Final Fantasy released, basically right as it spiked up to $15. Like literally I added this to my list. I'm like, I gotta watch this, and it goes 15. CK had, again, 8 for sale at $5.50. They were buying 622 copies at $2.75. And there were 417 listings on TCG Player LP or better for $4.87. So we can see this, this attrition in numbers. When we look at this card in Commander on the surface, this is Emerald Medallion slapped to Hardened Scales, stapled to Vivian Arcbow Ranger's +1 ability. It is all 3 of those cards effectively in one. It does a whole heck of a lot, just like all of the crystals. They all start with their appropriate medallion cost reduction on top, and then it's a bunch of stuff It's 3 kids in a trench coat, man. It's like that.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Vincent Adult Man.
Yeah. When we are looking at the utility of this card inside Commander and how it plays overall, it really seems like it can only be played 2 ways. It can be played as a value card or a combo card, and that's it. You're not really doing much more than this. There's the bracket 1 side of things, which is like, hey, look at my Hydras. And then there's bracket 4, which is look at all my Ballista combos. And again, that's how we do it in the casual side and how we do it on the competitive side. And nary the two should meet. Can you mix some of this stuff together? Yes, you can, but the divide is still pretty stark. Can you play your Hydras with Earth Crystal and some of the combo pieces? Yeah, but you're going to get really aggressive with your combos really, really quickly. When it comes to color pairings of this card, you can basically put it wherever you want. When you look at Commander's Spellbook and you look at the combos that are involved here, I think this is in everything but like 5 color combo. You can stay mono green and you can combo out with Ballista, period. Like, it's just easy to do.
Yeah, just Ballista.
Yep, and the more colors you add to the deck overall means the more directions you can actually go with your combo. So instead of just making a bunch of mana for Ballista, you can then start making infinite life. You can deal infinite damage. I'm pretty sure you could take infinite turns. There's a bunch of stuff that you can do as you grow the colors around this card, so it's easy to see why there exists a divide in ways to play this card. Comboing out is just easy, and it can happen very quickly. Now, as I said, we have up bracket, down bracket stuff. The best examples of this down bracket play are decks that are helmed by cards like Gargos, Vicious Watcher, and for those that don't know what this card is, it is a, hey, look at my Hydras card. It costs 3
Yes, it is.
and 3 green for an 8/7. Vigilance. Hydra spells you cast cost 4 colorless less to cast. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, Gargos Vicious Watcher fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. That's it. End of card. Does this combo out with the Earth Crystal? Yes, it does. Why? Because everything does. It's a ham sandwich. And Miles Morales is another card at low bracket because when you take a look at the aggregate Miles Morales deck, it's just creature type spiders. That's it. Miles Morales, the flip card, just wants to deal with a creature type spider.
Yep.
Again, could you combo out with it? Yeah, you can put Walking Ballista in anything. It's an artifact. It's colorless. Awesome. And there are some landfall-based decks that can be pointed to as being more casually slanted. However, because they all involve +1/+1 counters, it's very easy to slide in combos that revolve around the Earth Crystal. And now we kind of have to evaluate, are we down bracket or are we up bracket with this stuff? And that's like another solid example of why it's really one or the other. Both is extremely difficult to do and well. There are commanders. Dragon. Oh, this is my Dragon deck. Don't worry, it's full of changelings. Cool. That is going to ranch the table. You exit the game first. Goodbye. The Dragon is nothing but a problem. It doesn't matter how you try and build the deck. That's kind of where we're seeing the Earth Crystal. Now, I do like the Earth Crystal as a card for more casual players. I think they are the actual target audience for this, but as more aggressive commanders based around more casual cards like Choco or Voha are printed, Voja, however you pronounce that, we're going to see more and more players move towards more aggressive strategies for casual themes, where the Earth Crystal offers a bit more play and combo utility. And so all this lower bracket stuff starts moving up bracket because of how easy it is when the power of all your cards is just so high. Good.
I was going to say it's like when you have like a casual group and the first person to make like a 75% deck does.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is always an awful board state. Because everything you do is so powerful and we can't interact with it that we have to say you're more competitive than us. And that this card reeks of that to me.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't matter what you're doing with it. Because of all the 3 abilities stapled together, it is just a runaway card, even if you just want to be doing something as simple as putting a bunch of elves on board, reducing the mana value of Priest of Titania and other mana elves from 2 to 1 and 3 to 2 respectively. It means you can do a lot fast. Timeline on this. When I was taking my notes earlier this week, there were 653 total copies at LP or better. And it sells about 30 copies between Yearman and LP per day. So that means we'll cut through this, exactly, in about a month. Like, we would just sell through if this price didn't go up to a point where people found it unsavory. There are almost 8 full pages of listings. And it took until page 8 to find somebody with more than like 4 or 5. And it's that card that spiked. They had 10 Yearman copies at $15.92 with free shipping on orders over 50. You know, the direct seller standard. Like, that's how long it took. This card had to go from a little under $10 to $15. It had to see a 150% increase, right? Before, we found somebody that had a fair amount of copies. This is just how, I want to say, like, popular this is, because people just nibble, or it's just difficult to buy. This becomes a $12 card, up from about 10 on page 5, and the number on that is 280 copies have to sell through. And by the numbers, that is roughly 2 weeks. A little under 10 days, basically. So in 2 weeks, we're gonna, if everything stays the same, move from $10 to 12. Right now, we're not at parity between market and CK buy list, but there is an amount of arbitrage to be had if you can buy at scale from TCG Player and move them to CK for credit. This is the difficult part. Like, you can buy a lot of copies in order to CK for credit, but it's going to be one of here, one of here, one of here. Pain in the butt. So buying a brick of 4 and shipping to CK for profit, absolutely something you could do. And as I note, the shipping cost averages out that you'll make a little bit of credit on all of these, like the $6, $7 copies. The $2 shipping on them nets you a couple cents in profit when you buy 1. But when you buy 4 and you have to divide that $2 shipping across 4, and then 4 of them, that's a 50-cent increase on each card. That's where you can actually make your money. That's why if you can actually buy them at quantity, it's a lot easier. I don't think actually vendors are going to be quick to reprice this card as we continue to get a deluge of hardened scales types effects being released into the Commander format, and people just move on from one of these effects to the next. Like, we just got Michelangelo Weirdness to 11. Yet another token. Like, we're talking about like 2 sets apart, 3 sets apart now, where we just got another one of these. So people are moving from one to the next to the next. So vendors are just going to be kind of slow when they can to reprice this, because they have stacked them to the ceiling already. So the immediate out is just going to be TCG Player, and you're going to buy in now at under 10, and you will list with shipping, and then you'll list for 12, make your 20% or more. That'll happen in a couple of weeks. And then in a couple of months down the line, when this becomes more of like a long-term hold, somewhere around the 9 to 12 month mark, that's where we can actually begin looking at buy listing if we're just sitting on quantities that seem illiquid. But I doubt that's going to be the case overall. Reprint equity on this thing. The effects of,
you can't.
The effects of these crystals aren't tied to Final Fantasy in any kind of way, which is the unique part. The abilities are just the appropriate medallion and 2 color specific effects stapled together. So I'm not actually sure if we have any set where putting a quote crystal or similar trinket into the set makes sense outside of Strixhaven, and even that would be a guess. And because it's like we go to Star Trek.
We're not getting this there.
You'll get a dilithium crystal, but it's not going to be 5 shades of it, right? Like
no. What if it's the 5-color crystal?
All right. But I get it. And we know what the Soul Stone's going to be. So we have the Soul Stone, so we know what those are going to be for the Marvel set. And there are a couple more in-universe sets coming up that aren't Strixhaven. And I don't know if these kinds of trinkets make sense there, so it's difficult to say. We're getting Strixhaven spoilers. This would be the next most obvious place I would expect it to be in the set about wizards when you use these kind of baubles.
If you're going to reprint it, yeah.
And then after that, my only idea was if we get mono or dual color commander decks in the future, these could be an easy include. And as such, I would imagine we'll probably see a reprint of those like within the year. If we were to get a monocolor thing, like if we don't get a reprint in a year, then I think we're kind of safe for a while. Like we only have one set of monocolor commander decks. They were the second or the third iteration of the decks overall. And importantly, they did include all 5 medallions. Each one had their own specific medallion in it. And then we got the medallions like printed again in Modern Horizons 3. So it's not like we couldn't see these reprinted in through a method like that, but it's very, very doubtful. I think Commander set is the appropriate place to put this kind of effect.
The one counter I would have to that is that these crystals are the generic name the crystals were given in Final Fantasy III and in Crystal Defenders. So there may be some weird contract language with that, but that's not worth actually worrying about in terms of the spec.
Yeah, I imagine it would still be some kind of crystal, but it would no longer be the Earth crystal. My first thought went to literally the diamonds from Mirage.
Yeah.
Right? And something like that, where somewhere between a medallion in Tempest and a diamond in Mirage exists something like
the
this.
moss crystal or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. You got it. Because we used sky, moss, fire, charcoal, and whatever white was. That's...
In 7th edition, it had a human hand in Japanese. That's all I know.
Yes. Yeah, I remember... for some reason, Sky Diamond sticks out of my mind. I can't remember any of the others from 7th edition. And then the last thing I have to note about this is just buy quantities. I opened one. I moved it immediately to a friend who wanted it, who was building a commander deck. I just threw it at him. And I've been trying to extract 6 copies from TCG Player for a couple of days now. And then that'll be it. I'll feel fine sitting on that. I wouldn't want to stack these. There's a reason why people aren't. It's not because they're not selling through. I just think it's one of those things where if you know you're going to have to load these up for a couple of months, churning through them and making 20% probably isn't where you want to throw a couple $100. You probably want to go wide and cast a net. This is one of those things where you can move pretty easily in TCG Player. This is also going to be a nice card to have in binders as well, which we haven't talked about for a while. Just moving stuff from binders. And I don't think there's any real way to lose on this card, as long as you can move it within a year, even a buy list. So that is...
Yeah, I was going
to say, so that's my pick for the Earth Crystal this week.
Yeah, I love this card. I have thought this is probably one of the most efficiently costed green cards in terms of just being green that we've ever seen. At 2 colorless, you're already a medallion, like you said. And then for 2 green, you get, counter doubling and extra counters. Just very, very good. And I don't know how much more pushed this kind of effect can get. So I think this may be hopefully one of the final iterations of this. But this card is insane. It does, to me, as you illustrated, run the gamut of casual to competitive for now. But this is, I think this one's a great, even long-term hold.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw people didn't recognize how good the medallions were in Commander for a while, and that definitely pushed them all for a bit. It wasn't just modern for Ruby Medallion. They became popular. So I assume there's going to be a cycle of this stuff where people are like, my deck needs to get lower to the ground. How do I do that? Do I want to just pay 2 mana for an artifact that doesn't tap for mana? And then they have the epiphany of wait a minute, it doesn't have to tap for mana. because it can actually discount all.
It is mono.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Einhorn is Finkel, right? And we might come back around on them. I honestly forgot what the other crystals do. I think green is the standout one of the bunch. If I had
the rest are not good.
I think the blue one is like extra mill, which is just obnoxiously boring.
Yeah.
If memory serves, yeah, you can like water crystal people out of the game.
Wind crystal is like beacon of immortality or something. Just double your cool.
Exactly. And so it might just be that the green one's the best, and it's why we're not seeing the others pop off on stocks either. But we'll figure that out in the long run. So our next episode will be the second half of event logistics. It will basically be entirely based around costs, so that will be fun. And if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with us, I am at Halt Iron Reptar. You are
at Damon_Thurston.
We are at MtG Cabalcast. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. See you next time.